invest in people in the long term, there has to be a mutual understanding.
Hustle hard, hustle hard. Closed mouths don't get fed. Thinking strategically, but acting like a gorilla is the kind of marketing that's small. The planet innovates very little, is highly risk averse, and indicates the
go, but I want to be more specific about Google and how they strategized in order to be who they are today. So when you think about this question of artificial intelligence strategy, yeah, we think about the past, but think what Google has. Think the search, the percentage of people who use Google for search. Think about Chrome. Think about their assets and data centers. And so now that they're positioned how they're positioned, the question isn't, what ethically, like who's going to control this, is what is Google going to do to compete against other companies using AI? Can anybody try to answer that one? I mean, that's an indication that they're probably not advertising it, right? So it's called Gemini, I'm pretty sure, but I think they've rebranded it a few times. But the reality is Google dominates search. So if you think about ChatGPT is simple, clean. And why do you think ChatGPT is simple and clean? Because they saw the model that Google used and they replicated it. So look at ChatGPT, it's just a Google. So now look at Google and see what Google does when, why would I use ChatGPT if I could just go to Google? How could Google maintain their dominance in search using AI? Or do you think they're investing in that? It is owned by a company called OpenAI. OpenAI is the primary investor in OpenAI. The institutional investor does anybody know? So the organization that owns the most shares in OpenAI is Microsoft. Microsoft is one of, if not the most formidable competitors to, you got to believe that strategically, when OpenAI came on the market and Microsoft started backing it, and OpenAI partnered with Microsoft, that they're coming after Google, right? Like there's no doubt that they have a strategy to take away market share from Google. So this is where it starts getting sweet. And I mean, I know we're new in the subject matter, but then I ask the question again: what does Google have that they can utilize to compete against Microsoft and ChatGPT? The resources. Think about it. They have physical assets. Do you know where these physical assets are, what they are, and can you name them? Like the name of these physical assets? Data centers. It's servers, infrastructure. They have to run these algorithms and these web crawlers all day. There's thousands of people right now searching using Google's tools. So if they have such a big infrastructure of this technological, just call it data centers and servers, they already have an infrastructure built out for speed. So the question is not can they compete with Microsoft, is how do they utilize their existing data and continue to build to be the best, the fastest, and the most accurate, information search and relevant AI. And they have to be fast. There's a great article called Speed as Strategy. So, again, I don't, there's no answer to this question. I don't have the answer, but the reality is you better believe that they have a strategy to compete against OpenAI and Microsoft. And you better believe that they're spending money, time, energy, and effort. It's just thinking through, okay, what capabilities do we have? Because they have a lot. What resources they have because they have a lot, and how do you use them to compete against this monster, this T-Rex coming after us? I mean, Google's a T-Rex too, but OpenAI and Microsoft, it's a growing T-Rex, and it's coming after Google to eat its market share, period. And so Google has to have a plan for what it looks like in the future.
Yeah,
I hear you, but let me go back because this is a perfect point, because this class we have to focus on, and I'd love to talk about that because it's a fascinating subject, but that would be the stakeholder perspective. Like we're talking about the influence of their customers and what do these decisions have on the community and the suppliers. I get it, and we could talk about that. But where we need to focus is the profit perspective, the winning perspective, the competitor perspective. And so we want to mostly say that, listen, it's going to happen. The trend is happening. How is Google going to compete? Accuracy of the information, the usability of the infrastructure, the integrity of the algorithm, even the image of using it, like having Google be your go-to browser, its ability to integrate into the multiple different PCs and Apples that we have. It's not just, can it produce the information, is the quality of the information, the integrity of the information. I believe in the case, if you read it, there was this problem with these websites that would put these keywords into their website where they have like a black background and they would type in black font all of these different keywords. So people would search for like used cars and it get some explicit website. So the integrity of the algorithm wasn't good enough. Like because they had this website, this used car website, but they had all of these other keywords in the background, it was producing poor results. So that's where Google came in, and with their algorithm, which is their key core competency, they were able to utilize that and leverage that to produce the best results possible. And guess how much users are paying Google to do these magnificent things? How much are you paying Google right now to clear your search results? So one of the key things that Sergey Brin and Larry Page wanted to do, and what they wanted to stay true to, and I love this truism, they say build the value first. Get the people exposed to the value first, and the profits will come. And I just believe in that. Like you get a bunch of people and you just say you're selling something, you're selling something, you're selling something, and they're just going to eventually leave you. You may make some short term profit, and it's like a used car salesman that I think of the movie Matilda, where her dad, the not so good dad, turns back the dial, and yeah, he makes some money and supports a living, but the people drive off the lot, and 2 weeks later, their car breaks down. Google is all about the user. They want to make sure the user receives value. They want to make sure the user has good experience. They want to make sure the user is not bombarded by ads. And that's what differentiated them in those principles when they started their company. And that's why they were able to compete against the Yahoos and the Bings and the Internet Explorers of the world, because they focused on their user. And so when you think about the future of, what does Google look like? There's one thing for sure, that it likely looks like a better search experience for us. Because if they're true, the best predictor of the future is the past in some kind of ways. If you look at the way Google has evolved in the last 10 years, you hope that they're going to stay on a similar path moving forward. And what was also cool about how they transitioned with their leadership is that Larry Page and Sergey Brin were super young. And they hired a CEO that was more seasoned and more experienced on building tech companies. And Sergey Brin and Larry Page were sort of still a part of it, but they definitely allowed a leader to come in. I think his name is Steve Slovak or something like that, and become the CEO so that the three of them can run the business together. And then eventually that CEO retired in 2011. And then Larry Page, I think, stepped up and became the CEO. So there's a level of humility around the leaders of this company. So let's transition just for a moment, because I think this is important, to how Google incentivizes their employees. What is Google doing to incentivize their employees that helps them build a strategic competitive advantage? And the word I was waiting for, Neo, and the word is incentive. They incentivize their employees to do what? How? When you say perform, I can define performance of just not getting sick for 6 weeks. I can define performance of not getting angry during the day. Like, how does Google define performance? What do they want their employees to do? Incentive is a key word, and obviously they want to be rewarded. So I'm just going to read this one bit from the case. It says one aspect of Google's organization that has garnered considerable attention in the company's approach toward product development. Think about all the products: Google Plus, Google AdWords, Google Scholar, Google Chrome, Google Android, Google X, Google this and that, and everything. And this comes from this. Employees are expected to spend 20%. This is a lot of time. 20%. If you put 20% of your money that you make into a bank account every paycheck for the next 10 years, you're going to have a lot of money in 10 years from now. Hopefully, that's a big amount of time of their time on something that interests them, away from the main jobs. Seemingly based on 3M's famous 15% rule, Google's 20% rule, which takes it 5% further than 3M, rule is designed to encourage creativity. The company has set up forums on its internal network where anyone can post ideas, discuss them, and solicit help from other employees. As a natural part of this process, talent tends to gravitate, big time talent, smart people, to those projects that seem most promising, giving those who post the most interesting ideas the ability to select a talented team to take them to the next level. Like 3M, Google set up a process by which projects coming out of 20% time can be evaluated, receive feedback from peers, and ultimately garnered funding. Until 2011, Marissa Mayer, one of Google's early employees and now CEO of Yahoo, acted as a gatekeeper. She helped decide when projects were ready to be pitched to Brim and Page. Once in front of the founders, advocates have 20 minutes and no more to make their pitch. Meyer articulated several other principles that guide product development at Google. I'll just read these 4 principles. Ideas come from everywhere. This is what they believe. Focus on users, not money. Innovation, not instant perfection. Don't kill projects, morph them. This is how Google operates, and they do it intentionally to foster creativity that gets smart people attracted to the organization, and they pay them well to do it. And in addition to that, they are allowing staff members that would be, just like you and I, we just got hired at Google. That's awesome. New staff members who have great ideas, share them, explore them, empower them, and see where they go. And the concept around innovation, it's a fun concept, if I may articulate it, and this is extremely strategic, is organizations think that if they step up to the plate, let's just say Google AdWords, and they hit a home run. That's a home run. Google just hit a home run. So what they should do is just sit on the bench for the rest of the season, right? No. The goal with innovation is to get up to the plate as many times as possible. And if you follow a baseball player throughout the season, what do you know about how many times they come up to the plate? Are they hitting home runs every time they come up to the plate?
No, but they're trying.
No, but they're trying. So sometimes you hit a home run. Sometimes you
Sometimes you miss.
Strike out.
you strike out. You walk. You might get a single, a double, but the majority of the time you ain't getting on base, which means your idea failed. But that's okay. Google puts in this philosophy of fail forward, fail fast, fail often, because every once in a while we're going to hit a home run. And if we're batting 300, we're fine with that, because guess what? We're up the plate, and we have at least 100 hits. 100 hits is better than one home run. Batting 1,000 with 1 home run is not nearly as good as 100 hits with, you get the idea. Excuse me. When I talk and get animated, sometimes my throat gets messed up. But okay, there's more to Google that we can explore. But I want you guys to see how this organization is designed for success. It's designed intentionally and strategically in order to compete in a very difficult environment in order to succeed and win. Because I hate to use the terminology, but there's Tyrannosaurus Rexes coming after them. And they need to know how to defend themselves against the competition. And they're doing a pretty darn good job, by the way. They just some stats that I think that I had put in there, but Google's market cap is 1.8 trillion, like we talked about. Microsoft is almost twice as big, by the way. Microsoft has all sorts of different projects at 2.7 trillion. Meta is smaller than Google as far as a market cap. They're at 1.4 trillion. And Amazon is bigger than Google at 2.2 trillion. So Google, and when it compares to Google, Microsoft, Meta, and Amazon, they are number 3 lowest on that list as far as market cap. But they're number 1 clearly dominating in search. And when you can dominate in search and you have that many users, you have a lot of opportunity ahead of you. And they also have consumer trust. I heard something. I was listening to Jordan Peterson the other day, and he said something about Google created something, some AI or some system that was anti-human, or I don't want to get into that subject, but they have made a mistake, a pretty moral error. And so there's a bit of a scare when it comes to that kind of stuff. So we hope that they have good moral leadership at the top, and of course that's very strategic as well. Subjects of strategic management, because it's really an art and a science, and there's no magic formula. It's really meant to be processed and chewed on and developed over time. So I want to expose you to as many of these thoughts and ideas as possible. One of my favorite cases, which we're not going to do this class, so I shouldn't talk about it, but maybe we'll bring it up in conversation, is a case called Console Wars. And Console Wars is all about Sega Genesis, if you remember that name, Nintendo, Microsoft Xbox, and we have PlayStation, Sony PlayStation, and this concept of these consoles getting into the homes and the strategy that these organizations deployed in order to get people to adopt a console, because they're once you sell a Xbox console, how much does an Xbox gaming console cost? And believe it or not, these organizations are not making a lot of money on their consoles. Where do they make their money? Subscriptions. So the goal is to just get that network effect, get the freaking consoles into the homes. And then once you have a console, let's say I'm a 12-year-old boy, and I beg my mom and dad till for what is it, 363 days out of the year before Christmas to say I really, 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 really want an Xbox. They finally cough up the $400, give me an Xbox, and then 6 months later, you're like, no, actually, I want a PS3. What are my parents going to say? I have to deal with that Xbox for the next 5 years. I'm not buying you nothing. So you were a consumer of, we'll use your example, of PS3 content and games for 5 years. Do you know how valuable that is? You know how much margin they made off of that, off the games that you bought? Not necessarily the console. That was a one-time buy. This strategy that I'm talking about is called the razors and blades strategy. And when you can see this deployed, so essentially the thing is, when Gillette sells me a blade, which is the handle in which I shave my face, and yes, I still shave my face, believe it or not, with a blade. Sorry, with a razor. Yeah, with a blade. The blade costs $25. How much do you think a set of razors cost? 5 razors for my, what is it, the Gillette, Mach 4 or whatever. How much do you think 5 of those razors cost? They're like $45 for 5 razors or something like that. They lock them up at the Publix so that people don't steal them. And I understand why, because they're so expensive. But I buy those razors, I don't know, I buy 40 of them a year. So the blade, or the razor itself, they're not making any money off of that. And they don't care. They want me to buy the blade, and they want to sell it on the cheap so that I buy the razors. It's the same concept with printers and ink. Printers and ink is the razors and blades model. It's the same concept when if you've ever been in the business realm, where you have this Xerox machine. That's what I call them. Sorry, these big major printers in office buildings. The printer itself is, they'll even give it to you for free. But what you're doing is you're signing a contract for them to come in and service it. It's the servicing of the printer and the ink and the paper and all that kind of stuff where that company makes money. So Kodak actually completely got sunk because of this, because Kodak thought that analog. Yeah, so cameras were always going to be what they were. And people were going to go and develop their film, whatever. They're like, film is where the money is. We're going to make money in film. Until digital came along and completely bankrupted them. So they weren't privy to the new trend. They didn't step up with the ability to capitalize strategically on what was happening in the market. So I know there's a lot there, and I don't want to get off track, but last class we talked about how important the industry was. Does anybody remember what percentage I told you the industry was when, the ability for the strategy to succeed, what percentage of their success is attributed to the selection of the industry? Well, the numbers look like this, if you remember. Resources, competencies, capabilities. So what's left here? The 20% is what? The industry you choose. Every strategy class, if you ever take another one, which hopefully you never have to, but if you ever take another one, will focus the beginning of their course on, okay, what strategy, and then they'll immediately go into something called the industry analysis. It's called the external environment. And so if you can take a look at this here, this is just a cool graphic that I actually saw today. It says industries also have a power curve where you play. This is the key fact. Where you play really matters. So I am in the consulting business, and my clients in the consulting business are electric cooperatives. And electric cooperatives, clearly, if you look here, are at the bottom of the rung when it comes to industry performance. They're even worse than airlines. And one of the reasons why is because they have extremely high fixed cost. You know how much money it is to build infrastructure for electric distribution? It's very, very high. You got to build a lot of infrastructure. And then you could hardly charge people enough in their electric costs to be in business. And so then airlines is the same way, extremely high fixed cost, but not a lot of variable cost. Meaning, you know, when the cost of them putting an additional person on a plane is like nothing. But the whole cost is just getting the plane and getting it into the air and traveling one place to another is the main cost. So you have to be able to fill the planes. So that means if you have to fill the planes, the prices gets very competitive. People are they want to make sure they get enough people on the plane. And, you know, towards last minute, they decrease their prices significantly. But you see here, software, unbelievable industry to be in. Tobacco, apparently that's still an industry that everybody is good at. This is 2014, so maybe not as much today. And then so wireless, aerospace, automobiles, media, machinery, food products, and chemicals all outperform these industries right here, according to McKinsey. And so is this graphic important to you before you decide to get a job, before you decide to build a company? You better believe it. It's very important to you. It's 20% of the strategy. This is the average annual economic profit, which is different than profit because it takes into consideration something called opportunity cost of firms within each industry. So we'll refer back to this to give more details. This is also an equally telling slide. When I say equally telling, I mean it's equally interesting to me. Okay, so when I just drew those stats, this is a little bit more specific on those stats that I drew. I said resources, capabilities, and competencies is 30%, 20% is industry, and the rest is luck. So this is kind of a little bit more detailed, where you have something here that says unexplained variation, 42.9%. This is essentially luck. Year effect, meaning like what year I guess the company starts, where are we in time? The industry effect, as you can see here, I said 20%, it says 18.7%. And then this corporate parent effect and the business unit effect, that is all taken into consideration to be internal competencies, capabilities, resources. So you can see it kind of draws out. It is a little bit more detailed when it comes to this 20, 30, 50 number that I put out there. So what influences profitability? Well, we don't know 43% of the time. Well, we're not really sure. I guess we're just profitable. Industry, 20% of it influences profitability. And then of course you have these factors here as well. Again, another fun figure to think, why is Google successful? That would be when you think about a business unit, you're thinking about the internal culture, the facilities, the resources, the capabilities, the competencies of the company. So let me see if I can be more clear with Google. Google had some good investors behind them. They had an algorithm. They had a PhD as the leading founder. They were operating at a time during the .com era where it was easy to raise money. So all of that added to the business unit effect. When I talked about the time, I guess that would be the time effect. But the business unit effect is the internal intelligence factor of the people within the company and the resources and capabilities that they have. You squish them all together and put them under a box. This is all the people, this is all the tech, this is all the infrastructure, this is all the facilities. Candidly, it's all the professors, it's all the administrators, it's all the branding and the logos and the culture, and you put it all in a box and you label the box business unit of MDC. That's what it would be. Obviously, there's a lot of things impacting MDC that lie outside the business unit, outside the box. So that hopefully gives you a good idea as what it means to have a business unit. But then outside the box, you got unexplained, you got year effect, you got industry effect. Some people think, okay, everything that's in the box, that's what matters most. And that's not necessarily the case. It is important. But what lies outside the box, what's happening in the industry, and the ability to adapt and to capitalize on opportunities that are outside the box, literally, of the business unit is important. So if you have, instead of a box, it's a strainer and there's little holes, and you're allowing for things to happen. And really what we're doing is we're still in the strategy formulation phase. We're talking about business models, mission, vision, values, and goals. Think about Google. What was their mission, their vision, their values, and goals? Or their mission is to supply the world's to organize the world's information. It's a great one. The vision is to have every user have access to the world's information. Their values are obviously innovation, creativity, productivity, this kind of stuff. I'm not sure what their goals are, but you get the idea. And so after we do the external analysis, then we're going to work on the internal analysis, what's happening within the business unit, the strengths and weaknesses. So when I put SWOT here, does anybody know what the S stands for in the SWOT? So the opportunities and the threats lie outside the business. So that would mean the strengths and the weaknesses are inside the business. So when you do a SWOT analysis, all you're doing is you're looking externally through the O and T, the opportunities and threats. And when you're looking at it internally, you're looking at the strengths and weaknesses, which is internal. So this whole chapter 2 and 3 is really going through this extensive SWOT analysis. So there's a couple different kinds of business level strategy is one of my more favorite because it's a lot to do with entrepreneurship. If you think about customer segmentation and pricing and differentiation and who are my customers, how do I best serve them, what customers should we go after? One of my favorite cases is has anybody gone to the gym, and prior to going to the gym, maybe you get dolled up a little bit, even men, they're like, you know what, I'm gonna go to the gym looking nice, and maybe the ladies, they want to dress nice. And if I wanted to dress nice and look nice in the gym, what is a store I would go and shop at and spend all of my money at so that I can look nice in the gym? It's Lululemon. And Lululemon and how they've differentiated themselves with their quality of material and how the material fits. And they actually have like an anti-smell sweat material. And they're racking in their stores. They only have a certain number of items because they don't want to make it look like you have 100 different pairs of pants to choose from. Like if you go to Gap and you want some khakis, you got like 500 pairs of khakis to choose from. And all of it, sorry, you have maybe like 10 different pairs of khakis to choose from. And out of those 10 pairs, there's like, essentially they're stocked. And Lululemon doesn't have stock. Lululemon makes it look like they're almost out of stock. So you better go there quick. And if you want that pair of pants, that's the last pair of pants we got. And then maybe we're going to go to a different style, or we don't have any in the back. So you better buy them now. And guess how much a pair of gym shorts, let's say for men, if I was to go there and I just want some gym shorts, I'll call them draws, but I'll call them gym shorts. and I go to Lululemon, how much am I spending on gym shorts? Possibly more. Like I would think 50 would be on sale. I think you're spending 75, $80 on quality gym shorts for men. And I believe the same case is for women. So one of them, it's actually true, but not true. If you study Lululemon, retail is very much not that. They're doing very well. They're making a ton of money and they're capitalizing on one particular segment. So that's the point. So that's business level strategy. We're going to talk all about that at that level. The functional level strategy, we looked at a video last class. We talked about it. It's McDonald's. They're making their money at the functional level. There's a couple other companies like Nucor Steel as an example. And so basically, if I'm in business and my functional level, the way in which I serve my customers is so important to my customers' experience, which is so important to my operations, which is so important to my efficiency in my organization, and I can capitalize on that efficiency in a strategic way, those are decisions that are being made at the functional level. It's executing on the work. And so at the functional level, you have to set up okay, so let's think about this. We just started a business as a class, and we decided that we are going to open up what is the company that we're opening up? We are opening up a candle store. So it's not a normal candle store. This is a big box candle store. Even though retail's dead, we're selling the best candles in the world. So we have to think to ourselves, okay, how many people do we need to have working at the candle store? All right, person greeting at the door, sounds good. Person behind the cash register, that's great. Maybe we're going to have an internal staff member that's going to do organizing and inventory. So all right, 3 people is fair enough. Okay, cool. Where are they going to stand? How long are they? What are their hours going to be? And what is the store going to smell like? How bright are the lights? When a customer comes in, do we want to put the stuff that's for sale right here in the beginning of the store? Or do we want to put that at the end of the store? Do we have a website and sell online, or do we not have a website and sell online? So living in this day-to-day, how we deliver value to customers is the functional level. These minute decisions that we're making on a daily basis, those are strategic decisions too. So that's the functional level, and that's a fun level to be at. A fun case study to look at there would be Starbucks. We may think that Starbucks is they're just a company that sells coffee. No. Starbucks has a slew of supply chain partners that are very, 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 very loyal to Starbucks. It is a massive operations, international operations, and they grew at rapid speeds because they were able to develop their supply chain. They were able to have good practices. They're able to hire and train the right kinds of baristas and employees. They're very, very specific about the way in which these major machines brew their coffee and the amount of coffee versus milk. And it's so particular that the functional level is really what drives Starbucks, is that consistency of experience that you get from one Starbucks to the other Starbucks. So that's the phenomenon behind the functional level strategy that we'll discuss in this class. And so how about global strategies? What do you think? What do you think that would be if you're an organization like, let's say, Taco Bell? What would be something you need to consider if you're going to grow globally? Cultures of other countries. What else? Government regulations, doing business in certain countries, and the risks associated with that. Government. Okay, so how about trends? If you think about nutrition trends or health trends for Taco Bell, and it could be different per culture. How about population, say demographics? Would that matter? What would you consider when you think about demographics? If you're Taco Bell, what would you like to see in a country before you go and open up 50 restaurants there? Yeah, I mean, I'm not exactly sure. I would think that you're right, that Taco Bell draws in a younger crowd. So if you're looking at a population within a country that is the majority, you know, geriatric, whatever that. So an older population, then yeah, that might not be right for you. Even though they love their tacos and they love their Mexican food, and there's not a lot of options, but the fact is that if they don't have the right demographics that fit our business model, remember, it's not about serving everyone. It's about serving the right people with the right resources. Then we're not interested. So that's what we'll talk about with global strategies. There's a lot more to it than that. And then so corporate level strategies. It's so funny how they're doing this last. Corporate level strategies is about diversification. It's about how we structure our organization with who owns it. Do we go public? It's about different industries that we operate in. So once you get to this point where there's something called horizontal and vertical integration. So if I told you that company is vertically integrated, what does that mean? I got a good one. So Target started doing this. So Target is a what? How would you define just a store of Target? It's in the what business? They're in the retail industry. Okay, so the retail industry, how does that industry work? Who do they buy their products from? They buy their products from manufacturers, and they put their products on their shelf. So it really goes from manufacturer to distributor, and the distributor brings the product to the retailer, and the retailer puts it on the shelves and sells it to the who? Customer, the consumer. So really Target is customer facing. So if I'm going to vertically integrate, if I'm Target, who am I going to acquire or own? What am I going to start doing myself as opposed to getting it from somebody else? I would own the manufacturer who makes the clothes. And then I would probably buy the distributor as well who distributes the clothes. So Target is beginning to do this. I'm not sure if Walmart's doing it. They might, because they have this Target brand, like a Good and Gather, I think is it. So there's positives and negatives to that. If I was going to vertically integrate, I buy the manufacturer, I now control the process, but at the same time, now I have to run a manufacturing of, gummy vitamins business. And I didn't want to get into that. I'm in the retailing business. I'd rather not. But when a company like Target vertically integrates, they do it strategically. So these decisions are made at the corporate level. Do we vertically integrate? Do we buy these people, or do we continue to outsource? One of the examples of a person who continues to outsource and does a good job at it is Starbucks. Starbucks doesn't want to own the coffee bean growing sites. They don't want to be in the business of farming coffee beans, but instead what they do is they develop really, really good relationships, trusting, loyal relationships, and they compensate their bean growers really well so that, yeah, they don't own them, but they take good care of them, and vice versa. They write really long contracts, and they're just in a good, and those decisions are made at the corporate level too. Versus if I was going to say something instead of vertical integration, I said horizontal integration. What do you think that means? So instead of integrating vertically and buying supply chain, buying distributors and manufacturers, and I'm Target, who am I going to buy if I want to integrate horizontally? You got Target here, perfect color, and then you have, yeah. So when you integrate horizontally, you merge or you purchase a competitor. So yes, it'd be Target buying Walmart, or Target buying, gosh, I can't even name another, um, like Sears. Sears is out of business. Best Buy or something like that. So some other retailer, Target just acquires them. So in the same industry, retail, they just grow by horizontally integrating. And so again, all of that stuff happens at this level. When I think about governance, what's another word for governance? Okay, so the other word for governance is oversight or management. And it's ensuring that the policies and rules and the structure that we created within this company. I shared a story in the beginning of class where we departmentalized, and that some managers didn't necessarily want to be a part of this new organization. They weren't happy. So in order to govern the new strategy that we're now implementing, I needed to sit down with the manager and say, hey, here's how we're doing things now. What are you doing? What's going on? Why aren't you doing what I asked you to do? And so then, unfortunately, I had to let him go. So that's an element of governance. So once you implement the strategy, you have to say, okay, we have to make sure we're following the rules and policies that we put into effect, that we're actually doing these things, and you have to manage them. And in addition to governance, you have to look at control variables. You have to see, are we doing it of quality? Are we getting good customer feedback? Are we performing well? Are our financials turning around? Are we hitting our goals? This is an element of governance. And so in governance, you have to say, how are we organizing our company? What kind of layers of management do we have? Now we're looking all internal. So what does the hierarchy look like? What kind of culture we have? I think it was Hortensio who said, is culture a big deal? Yes, look, it's right here. It's a whole chapter. And then you have to think about controls. So how is the company organized? What are the job descriptions, the job responsibilities? What does the hierarchy look like? That's really the structure of the company. Then the culture, what kind of values are we operating in? Do we have a customer service culture? Do we have a performance culture? What does our culture look like? And then in addition to that, how are we measuring? This is what controls are. While we're measuring, if we have a goal and we say we want to hit this goal, then okay, so 6 months later, are we seeing, all right, have we hit the goal? Did we hit it? Okay, no. Okay, then you go back and you change the goal, or you say, well, why not? Feedback, right? Like, what's going on here? So that's controls, culture, and structure. So that's on the implementation side. And I think a lot of your education thus far, and this is what's so cool about this class, you took a class on, let's just say, principles of management, right? So you talked about, these three things right here. You talked about culture, controls, and structure. Managing is planning, organizing, leading, controlling. Cool. Like, that's one aspect. The implementation, awesome. But did you talk about the external and internal environment? Did you talk about what customers we're targeting? Did you talk about how exactly we're functioning our business? Did you talk about globalization? Did you talk about the diversification of portfolios? And you may say yes, 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 but this class encompasses it all. That's why it's more of a junior level class, and you have to put on this hat of senior level conceptual managerial thinking to really get kind of what we're doing and why we're doing it. And the Lego group has a mission. Legos, Legoland, this kind of stuff, to inspire and develop the builders of tomorrow. That's their mission. So that mission dictates everything they do. It's very important. It's the purpose of the company. A vision is a desired future state. So this is the beginning process of strategy formulation. You have to have these things down. Values, we talked about that in your major goals. This is very important in strategy formulation. External, internal analysis, we talked about. I want to look at this slide just for a second, because bear with me as I read it and try to make sense of it. But it's very fascinating to think about this. So there's something called the design school. It's reconsidering the basic premise of strategic management. Strategy formulation, which is what, is the whole first 8 chapters of this class, is a design process that matches internal aspects, the competencies, the capabilities, the resources of an organization, in parentheses, distinctive competencies, with its external environment, threat, and opportunity. So that's a fascinating concept, because we're looking at the external environment and we're looking at what we have. We're saying, what we have, how can we capitalize on what's happening out here with what we have? And I teach entrepreneurship, and it's such a fascinating subject to teach, because typically the entrepreneurs have very limited amount of resources, but here's what their competency is. They're very good at thinking creatively with the limited amount of resources they have. So there is a story of a business that I worked with that was opening a restaurant. And the restaurant, there was a physical space, and they had leased this space. They hired waiters, waitresses, chefs. They had all the plates, they had all the tables, and they had everything set up to open up this restaurant. But unfortunately, by the time they had everything done, they had run almost out of all of their money. So they weren't able to market their restaurant, to communicate that they're opening a restaurant in this new town. So they ran out of money. They didn't have enough money. So what did the entrepreneur do? Well, they just quit. Strategically, they're like, well, I don't have, I'm struggling. I'm limited in my resources, so I'm just going to go away. No, they didn't quit. They decided, they said, look at all of these things I have. I have waiters, waitresses, food, cooks, plates. What am I going to do? Well, they said, well, when in doubt, have a party. They said, we're going to have a grand opening party. But they did not market this party because they didn't have the money. What they did with their grand opening marketing party is they went to every hairdresser in town in a 30-mile radius, all of the hairdressers, printed out basic flyers that said VIP pass to opening night, brand new restaurant, free booze, free drinks. And they only invited the hairdressers, every single one of them. And they spent 4 weeks inviting these hairdressers, or 2 weeks, or whatever it was. And what do you think happened? What do hairdressers do all day long for the next 3 weeks after they attended this party? Have you ever had a dead quiet haircut? Maybe, but likely people talk. How you doing? Where you been? Well, the hairdressers are saying in the chair, they're saying, have you been to this new restaurant? There's a new restaurant over here. Unbelievable. They had such a great time. So they're literally sharing the fact of this restaurant, and the restaurant took off, did really well. So what that organization did is they took a look at what they had, and they used what they had creatively to impact the external environment. So that's matching the external environment with the internal environment and capitalizing on opportunities such as hairdressers, untapped opportunity in the external environment. And so that's just a fun example to think through what can you do strategically in order to be successful. So the design school says strategy formulation is a deliberate process. Responsibility rests with the CEO. Model of strategy formulation must be simple and informal. Strategy should be unique and explicit, requires simplicity. Strategy should be fully formulated before implementation. So let me try to paraphrase that for you. There's an ivory tower of smart people that are somehow holier than thou, and they get together in a room and boom, poof, here comes this magical strategy. And as long as everybody falls in line and they can articulate this simple strategy, then the company's going to be successful. That's what the design school says. There might be some truth in that because there may be smarter people than us making smart decisions that, hey, I don't pretty good at teaching class, but I'm not really great at figuring out what Google should do with AI next. So there may be some credibility to that. But here is the truth of it. And it's kind of a mixture of this. The school's promotion of thought, independent of action, strategy formation above all, as a process of conception rather than one of learning. So it is created as opposed to learning. So can strategy just be created, or can strategy be essentially implemented over time, and can it be emergent? The school promotes that structure should be determined by strategy, but the past counts. It must be an integrated system. So think about this. You design a company structure based on the strategy. Structure is the CEO, there's 3 vice presidents, and under the vice presidents, there's like accountants, and under the accountants, there's salespeople, and you sort of design a structure based on the strategy. Or is a company operating with an existing structure? And based on the existing structure, a strategy comes about. So, again, I don't know how to say that any differently, but if you can think about that, the structure could happen unanimously, or it could happen. Am I trying to say? It could have been something that happened ironically or accidentally, or there's been no thought to it, and people have just been working, and things have been working well. So therefore, you take a look at the structure and you say, well, things are looking really well, and then you formalize the strategy based on how things are working. So that's another way to think about strategy. You don't have to be in a magic ivory tower and come up with this magical formula. You just take a look at what's working and what's not working. You do more of what's working, and that's it. Doesn't have to be that complicated. Explicit strategies are binders designed to focus direction, and so too block the peripheral vision. It promotes inflexibility. This is a big one. So if I told Hortensia and Lady, and I told who else was in this class, Yasel and Tammy, I said, listen, here's how we're going to operate as a business, as a company. Here's our strategy. And so what I'm doing by saying that is I am doing something called anchoring you. I'm telling you, as the president of this company, that this is going to be our strategy. So now in your mind, this is how you're thinking. You're like, oh, Miami Dade College is AI for all. That's our quarterly goal, or whatever it is, our QEP. And so all I'm thinking is AI for all. And so, but instead, if you just didn't say anything and you just allowed it to organically emerge, and you allowed me to be flexible, well, AI for all or just AI for some? Does everybody have to use AI? And if I can challenge that and be more flexible in my thinking as an employee, that might actually be better, as opposed to pigeonholing people into this strategy. So this is where the art comes about as leaders: is do we want to just tell people what the strategy is, or do we want to give them general guardrails or guidelines, or say boundaries, and say, here's some ways in which we want to operate, but feel free to be as flexible as you want within these boundaries, and be creative. I mean, that's sort of what Google is doing now. The opposite of that would be if you go to a franchise, even a Chick-fil-A franchise is like this. They pretty much have a template they're just going to give you. Do you think Chick-fil-A is interested in your opinions about Chick-fil-A strategy as a franchise owner? Do you think they care what you have to say about how their Chick-fil-A sandwiches are cooked? No, they're not really interested. They want you to follow the template as designed, or they want you to get up. That's it. So one of the downsides, again, I won't get into the details of owning franchises, is just that they box you in. So if you could take that analogy of being a franchisee, franchisee, and owning a franchise, and the limited nature of what you would be able to do strategically, now transition that just into your business unit at your company, and into this law firm that you work at, into the somebody, I think it was Andrew, said he's working in a equipment manufacturing or equipment business or something like that. Like, if you were boxed in to one particular strategy, it wouldn't be as flexible. So these are good critiques. The school promotes the formulation implementation dichotomy and encourages leaders to oversimplify strategy, which can sometimes be a fatal flaw. If one thing is for sure, take a look at the size of this textbook. Take a look at just some of the things we've talked about, tonight. Is strategy simple? Is it? You're playing 4D chess sometimes. It's not 2D. It's not. There are many moving parts. It needs to be thought about in detail, but it needs to be put into play and then messed with. Okay, so we understand what SWOT is. Criticisms of formal planning model. So this is where we talked about that one question where we're critiquing the formal planning model. Unpredictability of the real world, excessive importance attached to the role of top management. Many successful strategies are a result of serendipity rather than rational strategizing. I love that one. This word serendipity. Let's look it up. What does serendipity mean for strategy? Strategic implications, discovery over design. Not all successful strategies are meticulously planned. Sometimes they emerge from experimentation, mistakes, or unexpected customer behavior. It's so important. Having room for that is important. Let me close this. Culture of curiosity and openness. Organizations that allow employees to explore ideas, like Google's 20%, allowed for that serendipity. Pivot potential. Many successful pivots, like YouTube starting as a dating site, or Slack, I didn't know that, evolving from a failed game project, are examples of serendipity in action. So if you guys have taken an entrepreneurship class, there's this word that's used often. It starts with a P. I think we just read it. Does anybody know what word? If things aren't going well, what do we do? I got my basketball shoes. That would be one. I don't know if you guys can hear me, but I think you can. I got my basketball shoes on and I'm dribbling. If I'm going to cross someone over, I have to have one foot down as my what foot? My pivot foot. Right. So you have your foundation, and it's a great analogy to think about. You have a foundation that you have one foot down, which means our values, our basic assumptions. You have something down, but the other foot is free to move in any direction. Powerful concept. Pivoting. So many successful strategies are a result of serendipity, let's call it pivoting, rather than rational strategizing. All right, so this is sort of an image of what we've been talking about. You have a planned strategy, and then you have a realized strategy. What does it mean, realized strategy? It's a mixture of deliberate strategy of the plan, and it's a mixture of something called exactly. And then whoever just said emergent, what are some aspects of an emergent strategy that you see over here to the side? Yeah, I love it. Unplanned, autonomous, and then serendipity. Autonomous actions by lower level managers. This is so important. Autonomous means they operate on their own. They're not automatic. Like they're not controlled by anything. They're controlled totally independently, autonomous. And they need to have that freedom to operate independently to come up with some different action that wasn't what you had programmed into them that is really fruitful for the company. And if the managers of an organization, maybe some of you have been stifled by your top level managers, and that stifledness makes you unwilling to be autonomous. And that's going to impact the emergent strategy. And if you don't have a quality of emergent strategy, you're only going to have the deliberate strategy, and the realized strategy isn't even going to include this emergent strategy, which means it's not going to be as good, because the deliberate strategy is no room for flexibility. So this emergent strategy is a real deal. It's a real thing. And we need to allow room for that emergent strategy to take place. It's kind of like, not to dumb it down, it's kind of funny because it is this simple. It's like you're going to a really important date with your significant other. They're not your significant other yet, but you want them to be your significant other. And of course, you're in this like rosy colored glasses, like we talked about before, phase of dating. And you're like, well, I'm gonna go 20 minutes early and just kind of chill down the street because I want to make sure I'm smelling right. And maybe I'll stop at the store and get some gum. And I'm going to leave a lot of room here for flexibility because I want this date to go really well. So that room for flexibility, of course, you have a plan in your mind. You know where you're going to take the person. You know what you're going to do. Obviously, I guess I'm speaking from a man's perspective, but you have really good plan, but you're also leaving room for spontaneity, and you're leaving room for additional flavor for the day to go well. And if you're super rigid, I don't know about you ladies out there, if somebody takes you out, and even if you have a husband, they're just like, we need to be there at 6:05, and the food is taking too long, and it's like we got to be home. That's not what we're looking for. That's not a formula for a fun date. Yeah, you might be able to check all the boxes, but over time, that's going to be tough. So that analogy, I'm trying to transition to a business and how we need to think about how to manage people in our business as well. Leave room for that flexibility and that spontaneity. Scenario planning, formulating plans that are based on what if scenarios about the future. We had Hurricane Irma hit our company, and it's a big story that I've told probably to other people in this class. But we, at the time, had moved into a new facility in Florida City. And the Florida City facility was a much more robust facility for us to operate. And also at the time, about a year and a half earlier, we had restructured, which was really good. And we now have a full-time human resource staff member, human resource manager. So the human resource manager said to me, like a year before Irma, he said, listen, Claude, we need to think about a hurricane. And I was like, yeah, I'm so big. What? What do you mean? It's not even hurricane season. I got 15 emails I have to send, and we need to make payroll on Friday. And I was just like, why are we talking about this right now? He's like, he said, just give me permission to spend this money and to design a hurricane preparedness plan. I said, of course, that's your deal. Go ahead, do it. Let's do it. So he created a text message list with every person in the company. If you've ever received these text messages, this is an alert from Miami Dade College, emergency alert. He set that up for our organization where 100 people were all on an alert system via text and phone call, letting them know what to do, what to expect. And in addition to that, he had a plan that if a hurricane was to hit and people felt unsafe in their home, that they could come to our facility and essentially live there. And the people that were operating our facility at the time, we had a mechanic. He purchased an additional generator. And in addition to that, we set up partnerships with local gas stations. So he did all this prior to Irma, believe it or not, that if a hurricane was to hit, that we would have precedence, like getting gas. Like we would be the first in line, essentially, that they would supply us gas because we're a business and we have, 50 trucks and we're going to need gas. So set up the partnership. And then as this storm, this is now like a week out, is about to hit. We're like, this storm's about to hit. We worked with Orca, which is Ocean Reef Community Association, to park our tree truck right at the beginning of the front gate because they thought that if people were trying to loot places, Ocean Reef would be a great target for them. So they wanted to park big assets in front of their gate to protect from that, to make sure vehicles couldn't get in and out. So we said, yes, we'll park our car there. So Irma hit, and believe it or not, like our employees did well. We had a couple employees stay at the facility, but we were ready. We had a plan. We had scenario planning in place because of this gentleman. And all I did was I was the first one to drive down Cardstown Road, and I was chainsawing my way down because there were trees going. But we had the facility, we had the assets, and right in the morning we did it. Made sure our employees were good. And my tree guy, the guy who was running the tree crew at the time, jumped into the tree truck with a chipper, and we were the front line cutting through so even emergency vehicles can be accessed to our customers in Ocean Reef Club. So we were postured and ready for this scenario. And I can't tell you just how important this is. I work with the folks in the military, which is a great experience for me to have to teach this class. And I work with a gentleman that was in the Green Berets for a long time. And he told me that they would have scenarios for every mission that they went on. It was like scenario A. Let me see if I can draw this. So you got scenario A, you got scenario B, and you got scenario C. And scenario A is that, we land in this particular situation and it's good. And scenario B is we parachute out of the helicopter over here. And scenario C is that we go in on vehicles or whatever it may look like. And the entire team of like, say, 10 people analyze every single one of these scenarios. They analyze them through positive, negative, whatever. And they come up with a selection of scenarios. This is every member, equal selection. And at the end of the day, this scenario C is chosen. This one had like the 60% of the people chose this scenario. So even though 60% of the people, that means certain people chose A and B. But because they understood the process, because they knew that everybody voted, that everybody had a say, that everybody analyzed it, and that situation C or scenario C was the best scenario, they all said, I'm doing scenario C. They all believed that they were going to go there. They all stood behind it because they trusted the process. So this is the power of scenario planning, is that when these scenarios come about, your team is ready to go. Formulating plans that are based on what if scenarios about the future encourages managers to think outside the box and be more flexible, anticipate probable scenarios. In a typical scenario planning exercise, with some scenarios optimistic and some pessimistic, teams of managers are asked to develop specific strategies to cope with each scenario. So in not this class, I almost messed it up, but in the capstone class, if you take me, we have a simulation that we run through. And the simulation is a set of scenarios and you have to make decisions. So that's business, scenarios. Identify different possible futures, formulate plan, invest in one of the plans, but be willing to hedge your bet and prepare for another scenario. Switch strategy of taking off that one scenario. So I want to make a quick side comment, and hats off to the Google team as well. But we are designed, this is getting into the psychology of human beings, so sorry for the side note, but super fascinating. To scenario plan, our brain is designing this. So there's little avatars of me right now going down this direction with what I'm about to say, this direction with what I'm about to say, and this direction. And I'm killing off the avatars that I don't think are going to behoove me in this moment. So I'm thinking, okay, what am I going to do next? And so in my mind, I'm saying, well, if I do this, 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 and this. And so which one is the one that's going to lead to me achieving the best outcome? Well, it's going to be me saying this or going down this path. So our brains are structured to plan for the future by the idea of killing off the bad ideas. Like, is it a good idea for me to get up and eat 6 pizzas right now? Well, no, I'm going to kill that avatar. Like that avatar is probably not going to work out for me. It might in the short run, but it's not going to work out for me in the long run. So this is the power of scenario planning, that we're already designed to do this. So how can we capture this in some of our strategic management process? There's such a funny quote just to get you guys a little bit of a laugh. This is Homer Simpson's version of planning for his future self. You ready? Oh, I can't hear it.
Spending Someday these kids will be out of the house, and you'll regret not spending more time with them.
That's a problem for future Homer. Man, I don't envy that guy.
Someday these kids will be out of
It's
the house.
just he just took a quart of vodka and a gallon of mayonnaise and downed it and said that's a problem for future Homer. And so this is a perfect situation of what not to do as a manager is you have to think about the problems you're going to face, in the future. So you get the idea. We already went over this. I used that ivory planning concept of decentralized planning, like allowing other people to be a part of the planning process is really important, as opposed to in an ivory tower approach. Strategic plans are formulated in a vacuum by top managers who have little understanding or appreciation of the current operating realities. Correcting the ivory tower approach requires managers at all levels of the corporation to be involved in strategic planning. So that's kind of the gist of that. Okay, so this will be the last concept, and I'll try to make it as quick as possible. There will be more talk in this class about decision making, because we're not just talking about strategy, we're talking about strategic management and decision making. And inherent in decision making is something called biases. And so what it means is that we have to check our biases and we have to understand what we're talking about. There's a great scene from Moneyball where this Brad Pitt is playing the role of this guy, Billy Bean, who is the manager of the Oakland A's, and they're sitting in a room and they're doing business as usual. And Brad Pitt is like, what's the problem? Like, we haven't defined the problem. And all of them they're just like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? Because they're all falling victim to their biases, and they're making decisions based on how they previously made decisions, based on how they were raised, and all this kind of stuff. Confirmation bias is one of the most powerful. If I said to you, no, I'll use you as an example. So there's somebody in this class that's saying to themselves, well, I've taken a strategy class before, and the experience I had in that strategy class was boring. So you come to this strategy class with the intention of looking for the boring elements of class. And when you find the boring elements of class, you're like, oh, I knew it. It's boring. And so you're confirming what you had previously already known. So if you look at it in other ways, is I want to travel to Costa Rica. And I expect when I go to Costa Rica for me to go hiking in the rainforest and this kind of stuff. So when I go to Costa Rica, I'm looking for rainforest to hike in, but I'm going to miss the beaches. I'm going to miss everything else because I'm looking to confirm what I already know. So it refers to the fact that decision makers who have strong prior beliefs tend to make decisions on the basis of these beliefs, even when presented with evidence that their beliefs are wrong. They're looking to validate their pre-existing beliefs. So if you think about that in strategy formulation, it's a major flaw. So we have to realize that these biases exist. Escalating commitment is a fun one. So, lady, you want to buy a house in 2 years, and buying a house is a thing, right? So you see a house and you're like, man, that house is awesome. The bathroom is big and beautiful, and it's got a kitchen. Ooh, that kitchen. And then Susan comes along, and Susan is an inspector. And well, you're already like set on this house, and you already have your escrow in, all this kind of stuff. And so Susan comes along and said, listen, lady, I got some tough news for you. This house has termites and it's littered with asbestos. What do you think? What would you do, lady, in a situation like that? So because a realtor they may have already known, which is unethical, but they brought you down so far in seeing the house, getting an escrow deposit, making an offer, envisioning your future family in this house. That's what they do. I'll go sit in that room and hang out for a bit. So they're escalating your level of commitment. But when you're presented with facts that you should definitely take into consideration and move out of that commitment, you choose not to. So it occurs when decision makers have already committed significant resources to a project, commit even more resources after receiving feedback that this project is failing. So this would be like Kodak continuing to put money into the analog business as opposed to going digital. They were going down the wrong path. This would be like Blockbuster not deciding to use streaming and continuing to build stores all over the country because they're like, oh, that's what we do. We'll just keep building stores because that's our business model. No, that was wrong. They should have bought Netflix. So Blockbuster no longer exists. There's actually one Blockbuster in the whole country right now, and it's not functioning as a rental store. What do you think this Blockbuster is functioning as? Blockbuster, and it's a museum. It's in like Seattle or something like that. But that's what happens when escalating commitment. So again, I'm using an example to tell you just how profound these biases can be that we need to check them, I guess. Reasoning by analogy, use of simple analogies to make sense of complex problems. That's kind of like when I took the box and I put the box over Miami Dade College to give you an idea of what the business unit is. That could be a little bit too simple. of representativeness, a bias rooted in the tendency to generalize from a small sample of even a single valid antidote. So in social science, we have this thing called being able to generalize, essentially. So you have to have a certain amount of, it's called a confidence interval, which means you have to have a certain amount of sample size. So I have to survey at least 1,000 people for me to be 95% sure that this 1,000 people represents the general population. That 1,000 might be, it might be even less, believe it or not, it might be 600, or it might be 60,000. It depends on how I'm able to generalize. So there was a story with this one, is that an organization, it was a book fair. A book fair came to a school and decided that they were going to do a book fair at the school. And they spent a bunch of money, and they had their booths out and all this kind of stuff. And on that day of the book fair, they didn't get anybody to come. So they decided that they were no longer going to do their book fair at that school anymore, ever again. But it turned out that day that they had a major like homecoming sports game or something like that. And everybody needed to go home and get dressed for homecoming, because everyone's going to homecoming. But because they only had one experience at that store, they represented at that school, they represented all of their decisions in the future based on that one experience. So again, I go back to that dating analogy. I mean, maybe this isn't a good one, but you go out with someone and, maybe you didn't have a good first date, or do you just say, I'm never going to go out again with you ever again? No, you might, there may have been something off. So again, that's maybe not the best analogy, but you get the idea. Illusion of control, a cognitive bias rooted in the tendency to overestimate one's ability to control events, also referred to as overconfidence. So that goes with that ivory tower concept. We just think that we're the leaders, right? And we can make the right decisions, and we've never failed in the past. And we think that if the ship is sinking, that we can just bring out the buckets and take the water out. No, maybe not. The illusion of control should be very clear when we articulated that 48% is luck, 20% is the industry, and guess what? Only about 30% is something that you can control. And even on that 30%, can you really control your culture all the time? And can you control your employees? And can you control your facilities? Sort of, so what are we really doing here? There's this guy, his name's Jack Welch. He was the CEO of a company called General Electric for a really, really long time. And so General Electric produced really, really high performing managers because they were groomed by Jack Welch. Jack Welch was pretty good at what he did. So that manager would get promoted, and then some company would come and recruit that manager away from General Electric, and that manager would become the CEO of some other company. And a lot of times, those managers that were recruited from GE, that were the CEO of other companies, did not perform nearly as well in the other companies, but they performed really well at GE because of the environment and because of what was happening. But if you put them in some other environment, they don't do as well. So you think about what's this guy's name? LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh, all coming to the Miami Heat in, say, 2013 or something like that. And that first year, these are three of the best players in all of the NBA. They had a stacked team. And the first year, they made it to the finals and they lost. So even though they're the best players in the NBA, they still lost. So that's because of overconfidence, because of illusion of control. Debatable, but that's just something to consider. Availability, a bias that arises from our predisposition to estimate the probability of an outcome based on how easy the outcome is to imagine. Devil's advocacy, a technique in which one member of a decision-making team identifies all the considerations that might make a proposal unacceptable. I love this. And I feel like we should all have, I don't like calling him a devil's advocate, but we should all have somebody like iron sharpens iron in our life to test us on our major decisions. So prior to choosing to work as a full-time faculty at Miami Dade College, I would consult with mentors of mine. I would consult with clients that I do business with. And I'd say, what do you think of me? Like, do you think I would be a good professor? Is this a good idea? And please, poke holes in my plan. Tell me something that I don't know. Try to be the devil's advocate. What could go wrong? What are some bad things about this? This is what we want as decision makers. We want people to challenge our decisions. So having a devil's advocate in your life, especially in the strategic planning process, is vitally important for this decision to be the best decision, not just for us, but for our organization. Dialectic inquiry, the generation of a plan, a thesis, and a counterplan, an antithesis that reflects plausible but conflicting courses of action. And then an outside view, identification of past successful or failed strategic initiatives that determine whether they will work for the current project. Oh, that's what I was hoping that would be the last slide. So that's it, strategy warriors. I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you,
It's
Professor.
inspirational when you reflect on some of these leaders that one might consider to be heroes and think about their lives